Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Epic Meta Podcast. George, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
Good. I woke up early. I even ate breakfast. Um, normally I don't, but today I did, so I'm good to go. Energized, have energy for the show. What about you? Do you normally eat breakfast in the morning or lunch?
I I just got a breakfast sandwich that I wolfed down before we started recording.
Perfect. All right. So this is the part two of the 1984 coverage. Last episode we did the uh, first part where we cover a little bit about the character, a little about the society that he lives in, the world building, and we cover the party slogans. We cover a lot of the background stuff. And today we're gonna go deeper into um, must talk topics, or the really the core of the book, the core of the novel. George, let's have you take the lead. Where do you want to go?
Okay, well, let's first discuss the narrative because we didn't really discuss much of the narrative in the first episode. We discussed, as you said, the world building or the world that Winston Smith, who is the main character, the protagonist, he lives in. And we discussed the narrative up to the point where he purchased a journal and started secretly writing in it, which is illegal in the totalitarian state that he lives in. So that basically covers maybe half of the first chapter of the book. So after that experience, we get a better feel for Winston's life. It's pretty depressing. He's constantly being surveilled. He's very paranoid that he's going to get caught. Okay. So he writes in his journal. One of the things he writes in his journal is down with Big Brother. And Big Brother is the leader of Oceania. So definitely if he was caught doing that, he'd be in trouble.
He met a lady. Yeah.
Well, one thing he writes about in his journal is he went to the movies. Do you remember that part? And the movies were horrifically violent. They were movies about refugees. I guess
I remember him talking about like mandatory like fun party thing, like you have to go and participate, and then in there, typically it's like, I don't know, ping pong and stuff, and then like you can see the movie together with other people. Is that the same scene? I kind of don't remember.
No, this is in his journal when he's writing in it. It's one of the first things he writes in his journal. He said he's out, went to the flicks, and the movie was just depictions of refugees floating in rafts and like helicopters hovering over them and then dropping bombs into their rafts and he talks about an arm that like the camera focuses on a detached arm flying through the air, and the crowd all cheers about that. And then there's in the proletariat section of the movie theater. One woman stands up and says that they shouldn't have shown that, because kids are watching, and then the police come in and take her out of the movie theater. but
let's go with the main core narrative before we dive deeper into his journal. Yeah.
The point of that, I think, is to show that the society is very, for the most part, except for that proletariat woman for some reason, is very numb to the suffering of others. They find it entertaining for the most part.
Oh yeah, they're messed up. Society is not well.
And we see that later when they talk about, they have public hangings, and the kids all want to go see the hangings.
Yes.
And other, and Winston casually talks to Syme in the canteen over lunch, and Syme is describing how he particularly likes it when the tongue sticks out, and when they're being hung. And he doesn't like it when they tie the ankles together because he likes to see the legs kicking. So it's a very desensitized population.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
So he's writing his journal. Then later on, we see him attending something that's called a 2 minutes hate, which takes place inside the Ministry of Truth where he works. And I guess it's just in the middle of the day. They're all expected to gather around a telescreen and watch the 2 minutes hate.
My interpretation or my understanding of that was basically a weekly or bi-weekly scheduled event, right? Something like that. It happens very regularly.
Yeah.
That they have to but it's not every day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. It might be every day, but it's definitely very regular. And what's contained in it is it's basically all propaganda. You know, the enemy of the party, Manuel Goldstein, appears. You see Eurasian soldiers, and this is supposed to whip the crowd up into a frenzy. And then at the end, Big Brother appears, and it's supposed to be a release. And so the whole purpose of this 2 minutes hate, I mean, it's a very repressive society, and so there's got to be a lot of rage building up in everybody, even if they don't want to admit it. And so this, I think, is not only a chance to focus their rage towards what the party wants them to focus it towards, but it also is an outlet, I think, for their pent-up rage.
Right. It's a mental release of stress and energy. But yes, it's planned for and mandatory, and everybody goes into essentially a fever. From what I get, is basically like super, just no thinking involved, no independent thinking, no critical thinking. You just, pour out your hate. I mean, they call it 2 minute hate for a reason.
Yeah.
And then after that, they sit down and go back to their normal work.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it. You just go to this thing as like an assembly for school, like, like high school. You do it, and then you go back to work, and that's it. It's like, you have to do it.
And then later on in the novel, they have a hate week, which is, I guess, like a yearly holiday period that they have where it's just the same thing, but for an entire week, and it's much more intense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't read the book, I would, we're not going to describe everything. It just in this scene, you were about to lead into where he meet his lover, or you're not there yet?
Julia?
Yes.
Well, he sees her in the 2 minutes hate, and at that point, he doesn't like her because he thinks she's very orthodox and right-thinking, but she's secretly commits acts that would be considered illegal, but she does it behind a guise of being an Orthodox party member. Right.
Basically, he met he noticed her. He noticed her, and really the book only has 3 characters or 4, depending on how you count it. I mean, it's less than 15 characters, so it's not that much. It's really just his journey into his life, and then he met Julia, and then things fall apart. So now throughout that journey, he kept a journal, which is key. Julia is a big part of his like second half of the story, like the middle part. She not instigate, but she empowers him. And with her, he felt more alive. And then that's when things fall apart. So, do we want to go over describe all that, or do you want to talk about O'Brien immediately?
No. Let's briefly sketch over this. So. The story basically follows a hero's journey plot, although it's a little bit twisted. The first act, I would say, it's all about Winston being alone, writing in his journal, going to work, having these secret thoughts in his head, but keeping them secret. And the thoughts are, he hates the party, he hates Big Brother, he hates his life. And then they describe his work and all that. And then at some point, Julia slips him a note, and the note says, "I love you." And then so this is like the second act. And they arrange a meeting where they basically meet and have sex. And they meet over and over again throughout Act 2, where they're, meeting and having sex and eating black market food and just,
Yeah, living their life.
living the life. But they're all
Falling in love, basically, but without love, because they both know that they can't essentially get married and have kids or anything. Like, it's all underground, it's all secret, it's all hidden and forbid, apparently, in this world. You have to just read the book to understand all of that. But yeah, he essentially, I would say, get rejuvenized when she's around, and that's how I felt about it. What did you? What was your take about it?
Yeah, I mean, so he has an intimate connection with her, which is something that people in this world generally don't have, is an intimate connection with another person. And but all the while they sort of know that they're going to be caught eventually, but they become more brazen in their, like, in the beginning they're very secretive about how they meet, but then they eventually rent a room in the proletariat section and just continuously go to the same room. So before that, they would switch up the places they would meet all the time and go in they would travel to the destination in different ways and leave by a different way. And they were very meticulous about not getting caught. But they over time, they become less and less meticulous about it.
Yep.
So eventually they get arrested. Well, before they get arrested...
Well, he met O'Brien first. Yeah. I think that's key.
That is key.
Let's
so O'Brien approaches Winston at some point, and talks to him about, he's very impressed with his work, and he asks him if he would like to come to his flat to pick up a revised Newspeak dictionary. That's the premise. But Winston suspects that O'Brien is an enemy of the party, and so he wants to actually meet up with him in order to join the resistance, or it's called the Brotherhood, if that in fact exists. So he goes...
So I wasn't... Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I wasn't clear when I was reading it, and somehow he show up to this thing with Julia at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, because I don't remember understanding it. Did you understand that O'Brien invite them both at the same time, or they just happened to arrive at the same time and O'Brien invited them individually?
So O'Brien invited Winston, and Winston brought Julia with him.
Oh, okay.
So right. As far as I know, it wasn't O'Brien's intention that Julia should come with him, but I'm sure he... it turns out that O'Brien is actually not a member of the resistance, and this is all part of him arresting Winston and Julia. So I'm sure he knows that Julia is an enemy of the party along with Winston anyway. So it doesn't really matter that they both show up together.
What's funny is I remember reading the first time. I apparently I remember everything incorrectly after my first reading because here comes the correction from the previous episode. I think I mentioned that the main character died. He did not die. I had to reread the end again twice, like this time, to make sure my understanding was correct. And it didn't say anything. It just says he chills out.
Well, no, they do talk about like, and even when the bullet was entering his brain, it was clean. So I mean, there is a reference to them shooting him
Okay.
eventually, but it's not directly described in the narrative.
Right. So it's never stated, but it's the possibility was there. Maybe that's why I
No,
felt.
well, no, it is stated, but it's not described. It's not a direct part of the narrative.
So do you understand that he dies or not?
Eventually, I mean, the narrative ends before that happens, but they do.
Okay.
It is talked about it. It is talked
Okay.
about happening in the book.
So maybe both times I understand correctly, but okay. So Julia, this time when I'm reading it, I think my spy movies experience have increased over the time, and when I'm reading it this whole time, I'm suspecting it could because things happen too fast and too convenient. I'm suspecting that Julia was in on it, that Julia and O'Brien essentially planned all this, but it turns out she's not. She's just another innocent or independent character who just happened to falls under this world. But yeah, that's what I thought when she showed up. But I guess he only invited Winston to this thing, not both of them. So
Right.
yep. So yeah, at this event, O'Brien pretended to be part of the Brotherhood and gave Winston what is called the book, and in the book, it's essentially how the Brotherhood is gonna win, resist, and conquer the party.
Well, but it's also a description of how the society actually functions and what the motivations are of the inner party.
Right, and I think it's through this book that while Winston is reading it, that's really George Orwell's like basically an essay, and I think this is like that. This is it. After the beginning, from all the way to this point where he received the book and started reading it, I would say is the core of the novel, because from then on, the rest of it makes more of a definitive explanation. Everything else before this point was just kind of world building, and then I thought that when he was reading the book, it was fundamental explaining of everything, of the real reality of everything.
Yeah, it's an exposition dump.
Right, and that's when we got into Doublethink and everything that's related to the party. So before we get there, do you want to cover more of the narrative, or we just cover as we go along?
Let's just briefly sketch it out. So, yeah, Winston meets with O'Brien. Winston and Julia meet with O'Brien. The book is delivered. So O'Brien is a member of the inner party, and they live in very nice accommodations compared to what Winston and the other members of the outer party live in. So Winston remarks that the elevator actually works and everything is so clean, and O'Brien has servants, and O'Brien can turn his telescreen off, and O'Brien has wine, and
yes.
Winston's never had wine before, and
yes,
and his cigarettes are packed nicely, and the tobacco doesn't fall out, and yeah, so it's interesting. So Winston and Julia meet up again later, and Winston is reading the book to her, and that in this proletariat apartment that they rent, and then they're arrested, and so that basically begins the third act, where it's basically we don't see Julia at this point. Winston is beaten up and tortured and interrogated for a long time, and then eventually, when he's broken down, O'Brien starts to interrogate him for a long time.
Yeah,
and
it's basically
and O'Brien basically breaks him down completely.
Yep, it's basically a conversion process and brainwashing plus torture involved. We see many things. Electroshock therapy was in there. Just all kind of mental reprogramming, so to speak. And then he eventually get released, and he's in this, I would say, called zombie state.
Yeah.
Throughout the novel, he referenced, before he was captured, he referenced these three characters that were essentially in the party members that somehow is also got captured, and he was mentioning in the torture process that there was proof that these were once prominent party members, basically, heroes turned into by the party turned into enemies of the state.
Yeah.
And
So if I could
Doublethink was in.
I can just
Yeah,
jump
go
in.
ahead.
I'll clear that up a little bit. So the three inner party members, Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford.
Rutherford. Yeah.
And so there was a picture in the newspaper where they were attending a party function in New York City on a specific date. And then later on, that history was updated to say that they had, on that same date, they had flown to Eurasia and conferred with the Eurasian High Command. So, and then while Winston was doing his work, he ran across an undestroyed picture from that original newspaper clipping that talked about them being in New York City. And so he held in his hand actual proof that the history had been updated. But at the time, he threw it away.
Right.
But when O'Brien was interrogating him, he actually produced the picture and told him, like, Winston, you had a hallucination where you thought you had seen this picture that I'm holding in my hand. And then Winston's like, well, you're holding it in your hand. It's real. And O'Brien, of course, destroys it, and he says, no, it's not real. And he goes, well, you still, you remember it, don't you? You were just holding it in your hand 2 seconds ago. And O'Brien's like, I don't remember it.
Yeah, between him receiving the book from the brother, or supposedly the Brotherhood at the time, and reading it, and then the torture scene, I think is the crux of what all 1984 is about, which is when they were tortured. O'Brien explained the mentality of the party and this government, and Doublethink was part of that process, and how how you need to be able to be flexible, but also like both intelligent and stupid at the same time, in order for you to comply and be a good member. And not only does, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to
say.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, not only does the goal of him torturing Winston wasn't just to that he submits, but he actually wants him mentally to agree, and he doesn't want him to just say, hey, I agree with everything. He has to be in a place mentally where he actually believes it, and that's when O'Brien lets him go. And it was kind of crazy to me the whole time reading it. I think Orwell really loves governmental and politics, but there is much more efficient way in our modern history of this happening. And then, of course, there are ways to just, I don't know if compliance versus actually, switching your mindset is necessary to get the desired results. So this party in this world of 1984, I think it's just going over above and beyond, just trying to get Winston to commit.
Well, remember what we talked about in the first episode, how throughout the history of civilization, there's always been a high class, a middle class, and a low class. And it's always the high class falls out of power when it loses faith in itself, or when the middle class rises and replaces it. So it's never the low class that rises. So the goal of the inner party is to keep the middle class in its place and to maintain their power. So in order to do that, they have to not only heavily police the inner party and keep them on the brink of starvation and observed all the time, but they have to get them to actually want to be a part of this structure, even though it sucks. They have to endure that hardship and want to endure it at the same time. So that's why they go through all that.
Well, yeah, keeping the other party members in line is, I understand that, but yeah, I mean, I disagree with Orwell's on this part. I mean, it's his novel and his book, and I love it, but there's like part of their thing is like they have a whole plan, and of course O'Brien laid this out as as eventually the children will grow up to where they're just gonna not have any relationship with the family unit, and it'll be much easier world once everybody think and behave a certain way. So this is like in progress, so to speak. This party is still in progress, and
but actually O'Brien, there's a point at which O'Brien says, if you want a picture of the future, think of a boot stamping on a face forever. So
yeah, I quoted that. Yeah, I quoted that quote. It's really.
But what he means by that is, and he goes on to explain. He's like, there will always be purges. There will always be the middle class will always be oppressed. There will. So this has to be a continuous process in order for the inner party to maintain its position.
Yeah.
And if they thought like you, where how you just described them going over and above the call of what's necessary.
Well, I haven't finished, but yeah,
then they would eventually become weak and be replaced by the outer party.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, so you don't have to. So here's what I meant when I say that they're going over beyond just to convert Winston. So Winston, if I was running, 1984, if I was the party, I would put Winston in the proletariat, right? And sure, you can take a test or exam or whatever to whatever age it was to move into the party.
16.
I would just use the children raising up in that world, like the new generation, and then the older generation. Because when we started out with Winston, we don't know if he was already. So he remember a time before. With that generation, I wouldn't bother with them. I would just, put them all in the pros. Yeah. Either wipe them out or labor camp or whatever. And it's more practical that way. But that wouldn't be a novel. It wouldn't be interesting.
Well, they needed adults to run the ministries and all that. So I mean,
yeah. So it's a society in transition, because as soon as if you program kids, as they grow up, they wouldn't know. And right now, Doublethink, or not Doublethink, the new language, new speak is still in transition.
Mm-hmm.
And both O'Brien and Syme, another character, talked about where, once Doublethink once new speak is in full effect, then it wouldn't be possible for all this to happen. And then at that point, I guess you wouldn't need to spend so much energy trying to convert people.
But no, I mean, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, because not only does the inner party want to maintain its position, but it also wants to persecute the outer party. Like there's a point at which
hunger for power.
Yeah, O'Brien says at one point that the what is it? The inner party seeks power for its own sake. So the goal of power is power. The goal of persecution is persecution. The goal of torture is torture. So they seek power for its own sake. They torture for the sake of torturing. And so I disagree. I mean, it is mentioned that by the time Newspeak, is the language that everyone speaks, which I believe they said would happen by the year 2050. That's in that appendix that you didn't read.
Yeah, I read a little bit of it. No, I did read. I did read about like the different vocabulary, and then I read through like certain stuff, and then I stopped. But yeah, I did remember seeing 2050 is when they theorized it would be complete.
But there is talk about how the revolution will be complete when the language is pure, and it'll become impossible to have an unorthodox thought using newspeak. But O'Brien also says that the persecution will never end, and it will always be in place. So, and people will always be tortured and arrested.
Sounds lovely.
So yeah. Well, he also talks about how the Nazis and the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin came close.
Weak.
Came close to achieving what the party achieved, but they never had the courage to go that last step. They always tried to maintain that they did what they were doing only temporarily in order to achieve a perfect society. And whereas the party in 1984 is, no, that's not our intention. Our intention is to maintain control and to torture people.
Right, because he compared the 1984 party actually admits that having power and ruling is what they want. And this is the things they need to do to gain that end goal, right? They don't care about, they don't need to pretend like, hey, we're doing this so that we can help you become better. No. It's just we're doing this because we want to be in control and maintain power forever.
Yeah, and part of that is getting the outer party to not only endure torture and persecution, but to agree that that is correct.
Yeah. Yep. Messed up.
Yeah, it is. It is. So this gets us into doublethink. Because what we just described there is there's two contradictory ideas at work. One, the outer party is to believe that they're part of this society and they root for the society and they want the society to succeed. But at the same time, they have to endure persecution and torture and very close surveillance, and at the same time not acknowledge that. But so it gets complicated.
Not really. I mean, it is confusing while you're reading it, but what they want is basically. So I had a note. I almost wrote it down, but it's basically quantum physics. With the wave and the photons, wave particle thing, where a photon, when it, they've done experiments and light behaves as a wave, but also behave as a particle. And so they want your mind to be in two states at the same time, and then just
and not to acknowledge that two states are occurring at the same time.
Yes, you have to be able to erase the past and believe in the new fact, and then extremely fast,
and then forget that the past has ever been erased.
Yeah. Now, of course, Winston put up, I would say, fight as much as he can, right? And I think some of it I was reading and I was like, oh boy, it's a little. If it was made into a miniseries or TV or movie, I don't think it'll be. It's a little bit extreme. I don't think it'll be shown because basically, it's just a massive torture scene for I think 20, 30 pages. Including the mental stuff too, but
it's brilliantly written. I think it's
yeah.
So I want to read a quote that I have in our notes about doublethink. So maybe this will clarify it a little bit. To know, and this is from the book itself. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies. To hold simultaneously two opinions which canceled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing them both, and believing in both of them. To use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it. To believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy. To forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again. And above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety. Consciously to induce unconsciousness and then once again to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you had just performed.
Yep. Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, it was really good writing to explain some of that. I'm curious if, Orwell was referring to anything in his current society or our real life world when he was writing this, or do you think that 1984 represent kind of like the ultimate evil party that a party can become in our society?
No, I think he was describing what the Nazis and the the Stalinist communists were pointing towards, but never could agree that, or never could admit that this was actually what was going on. Yeah, because so like for instance in the Soviet Union under Stalin, people were worked to death in labor camps, but at the same time they had to outwardly display that they were patriotic citizens and that they lived in the best society, but at the same time their standard of living was very low. So I think that was the inspiration for Doublethink. You have to, those people living in that situation had to hold two contradictory ideas in their mind at the same time in order to stay alive, because if they complained, they would be killed.
Yeah. Yep. I think it makes sense to read it, but at the same time, people living in 1984 wouldn't know they're practicing doublethink. They would think that's just how you process information.
On a subconscious level, I guess they would. On a literally subconscious level.
Yeah, because the word doublethink wasn't used from O'Brien to describe to Winston what's going on, right? He just wants him to do it. He did do it?
I believe he did, yeah.
I don't remember. I just remember Winston having, of course, a very difficult time. Yeah,
because O'Brien would hold up 4 fingers and he'd say, "How many fingers am I holding up, Winston?" And Winston said,
"Yeah." And he said,
hold on,
5.
Hold on. Winston said 4, and then O'Brien said, "But if the party says 5, how many fingers am I holding up?" And Winston says 5, and then O'Brien hits the dial on this torture device. And he's like, "No, you don't actually believe that." He goes, and so he kept holding up 4 fingers in front of Winston's head and asking him how many fingers he was holding up. And if he said 4, he would torture him. But if he said 5, he would also torture him because he didn't actually believe him. He only stopped torturing him when he didn't know anymore, like when he was just so broken down and confused.
Yeah. It was a scene because I don't remember. I think the first time I read it, I must have not read this part or something because I don't remember it. And then watching it reminds me of Clockwork Orange. I don't know if you ever seen that movie.
I have.
There's a painful. It makes me fear dentists, and it reinforces my fear of dentists because there was a scene in there where they do torturing with unless I remember it wrong or some other movie.
Where they had his eyelids propped open and he was forced to watch a movie, and then there was a guy next to him putting eye drops in his eyes. So I guess they wouldn't dry out.
I was saying this is on par with that, but in text format, and it was just brutal. I was just reading this and I'm like, good lord, how does he know? Oh, so what's good is that the evil or the bad character O'Brien would know whether or not Winston fully committed or just pretend to commit, because then he does not let up until he gets the full commitment from Winston that he's actually saying what he thinks and what he believes. So if you lie, he'll detect it. And the torture continues. So
there's many instances where Winston where the book would describe what Winston was thinking, and then O'Brien would say, "Right now you're thinking," and he would say exactly what Winston was just thinking.
Correct. Yeah. I was every time there's an inner monologue, I was thinking of there's a medium out there. It's Japanese cartoons called anime, and they do a lot of this where because it's very boring in a movie to do inner monologue, the characters would do exposition instead, where they talk to another character.
Yeah.
But Japanese cartoon with anime, they do this a lot, and some reason it's not boring to watch that. And I was thinking that maybe certain novels, when they go to TV, that the magic of it is lost because of this right here, um, where you lose the magic in regards to the character's inner monologue and how they reason through certain steps. And I was trying to see, what a 1984 can do, and I would say that anime is a good medium for it because certain torture scene is too graphic to be in I would say real flesh context. So in a cartoon context, it's still disturbing, but because it is, they can draw out the emotions more because the character can be more expressive with animation.
I thought the movie starring John Burton as, is it John Burton? No, it's John Hurt and William.
John Hurt, yeah.
And William Burton.
Yeah, I saw it on IMDb, but I didn't see. I've never seen it. Did you?
Yeah, they did a great job with that. Yeah, it really worked well, I thought.
Do you think they miss anything from the book to that movie, or from that movie to the book?
There are certain scenes that they that they left out because, like, there was one scene where Winston goes into a pub and talks to an older proletariat about
Pass.
Yeah, so it's John Hurt and Richard Burton, but yeah, and that doesn't appear in the movie.
Yeah,
and I think it's just a movie has to be 90 minutes long and it has to follow a 3-act structure, which the book does, but it all has to kind of fit into that structure of a movie, and a movie is different than a book. You can't. It's hard to. It's more challenging to display a character's inner thoughts with specificity in a movie, obviously, because you have to do it through facial expressions, and maybe you can have like a what's that called when they play dialogue, like say you're watching
thought, like a thought where like in the cartoons where you have a thought in your head.
Yeah, but you hear what they're saying.
Right.
There's a word for that. It's escaping me right now. But anyway.
Narration, maybe.
Yeah.
But
no, let's not spend any time.
Yeah, you can't really do that. Yeah, but
I mean, you can,
it's difficult.
but you risk immersion breaking. It has to be done very artfully. So anyway, the movie 1984 is just, I think, is, some people didn't like it because it's very stark and it's very I don't know. The pacing might be slow, but I think it's done really, really well.
Yeah, I mentioned in the past, but I'll recommend you watching Equilibrium. It's very similar tone to this book, not exactly the same way, but there's an overarching party that's trying to push humanity a certain way, and then characters kind of fight back. But the difference is he actually succeed. So it's a little more uplifting than 1984. So part of that is being able to do doublethink, and then the party has so much power and control that they actually can change the past, which is then I don't know. It's kind of modern society where we live in social commentary calls it post-fact world. Do you think we're having the same problem as 1984 is having?
No, because I mean we have a problem, but it's not the same problem. We have a problem that there's now two sets of facts. There's like the Democratic facts and the Republican facts.
Jesus.
And if you subscribe to one or the other, you cannot subscribe to the opposite one. So But in
Ridiculous.
1984, there's just one set of facts, and they're all lies, but those are the facts that you have to believe in.
Yep. Well, we covered some of that. Like Winston worked in this Ministry of Truth. Is that correct?
Yes. Ministry of Truth.
Yeah, and that's his job, is to update, books, newspaper, everything, anything that's record information. He works in a massive organization that does this. Now, what's key is, or what's I noticed, it's not key. It's something I noticed that during the torture process, you brought up O'Brien produced the photograph that Winston was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember early in the book, he would just he thinks he's destroying information, but what he does is putting him into a chute. He doesn't really know what happens in that chute, right? Like the book doesn't cover that.
Yeah, it does.
It does?
It's sent to a furnace where it's incinerated.
Now, do we know that that's true, or that Winston believe it goes to a furnace?
No, I think it goes to a furnace. But but the fact that O'Brien could reproduce that photo suggests that the actual truth is recorded somewhere and maintained.
Yeah. Yeah. So that gives me some hope. Do you think that? So this time when I was reading it, I thought things were too convenient for Winston, but it turns out they've been tracking him for, was it seven? I remember seeing 7 years.
Yeah.
And then what's the 4 years? I remember seeing a 4 year somewhere, but I couldn't pin it down. Maybe I was making that up. But so it's been a while. They're following him for a while, which to me sounds like, yeah. I mean, if he remembered like the old past before the party was around, then he just kind of I guess was ready to be caught, because he selected he went to a store that's nearby. It doesn't sound like he went very far to buy that journal.
It was in the proletariat section. So yeah. Not the section of town where he lived.
But still, I feel like O'Brien or the party would create those stores and sell those things so that they can track people who are, trying to
Mr. Charrington, who owned the shop in which Winston purchased the journal, was actually a member of the Thought Police.
Yeah. So it was a setup the whole time.
Well, I don't know.
Just like a.
I mean, I don't know.
It's like a net. It's a net. They just leave it there.
Yeah.
And whoever get caught.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's. I mean.
But he bought the journal. So if the party had been watching him for 7 years, he bought the journal like in the 7th year or 6th. But later, he bought it late in the process of them observing.
Yeah. So they just observe everybody, but whoever, I would say, goes to the store or go to any copy of those store, a red flag would pop, right? And then they would track him even more, because apparently they were reading his whole thing.
Yeah. And
his whole journal.
Winston placed a piece of dust on the cover of the journal and if it had been disturbed, then he'd know that somebody had read his journal. And apparently the party meticulously replaced that piece of dust on his journal after they had read.
Was that okay? I remember reading that. I thought he was just like imagining things, but I guess no, he did it try to.
He initially goes, I could put a hair on the journal, but no, that would be too obvious. So I'll just put a little tiny piece of dust in the corner of the cover.
Yeah. I couldn't help but think of all these other movies that came up when I was reading this, because it's so controlling and creepy. I was just, he got some good stuff going on with Winston cannot win, and I felt bad the second time. I still was like, all right, dude, just give up, man. He was still trying to fight it throughout the whole process. And should we go to the last scene, because this is where he was actually defeated, to room 101. Tell tell us about Room 101.
Okay, so Room 101 is different it differs depending on who they're taking to Room 101. Room 101 is the room where a person that they're breaking down is confronted with the worst thing in the world for them. And O'Brien talks about it, for some people it's being buried alive. For some people it's having a limb amputated. But for Winston, it was rats. He has a unnatural fear of rats. And so what they did was they attached a 3-compartment cage to his head. So his head fits in one compartment. There's a middle compartment. And then there's a third compartment where there are rats, 2 rats in that part of the cage. And there's doors that separate each compartment. And so O'Brien, Winston's like, what do you want me to do? I'll confess to anything. I'll tell you anything. I told you everything already. What do you want? And then O'Brien's like, you'll do what is required of you. And so O'Brien lifts the first door, and the rats run into the second chamber. And so they're next to Winston's head, but there's a wire door separating them. And O'Brien goes, in some parts of the city, rats will attack a baby if a mother leaves it unattended for a short period of time. And they show remarkable intelligence in knowing when a human is vulnerable. Sometimes they'll bore through the cheek and devour the tongue. Sometimes they go to the eyes first, and so by this time Winston is like freaking out, like, I don't know what you want me to do. But eventually Winston, it clicks in his mind, and he says, no, do it to Julia. Don't do it to me. And so he betrays Julia, which I guess was one of the final doors that he still had up of his sanity, I guess.
His last barrier, because earlier in the book, when he was being tortured and thoroughly beaten or defeated, he mentioned that, hey, throughout this whole thing I never betrayed Julia. And O'Brien was like, that's true, that's correct. And Winston thought that he would win that little space. He said, hey, O'Brien is admitting something. And my sense reading that part was that he felt a little bit of victory. Did you read the same? Did you read it the same thing or
yeah?
No?
So Winston, he says, I've never betrayed Julia, and O'Brien says that's true. And then Winston's thinking, O'Brien's so smart because I've denounced Julia. They've questioned me. I've told them everything about her. I've accused her, or I've admitted that she committed all these crimes and everything. But what he was really referring to was that he never stopped loving her, and O'Brien understood that in that moment. Winston half expected O'Brien to say, "That's not true. You denounced her." But O'Brien understood what he meant.
Yep. Yeah, I shouldn't have said anything because, well, if he, I guess
O'Brien knew. Anyway.
Eventually they'll figure it out. But honestly, this scene with the rats and the helmets and contraption, I was like, I think it doesn't matter what your fear is. I think that would make me pretty fearful too. Period. Replace that with anything. Even if it's not my fear, you put any animal near my face and they're about to, eat me alive.
Yeah, but to certain people, although that is terrifying, it might not be the most terrifying thing in the world.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be pretty terrifying to me, even though I don't have a natural, I guess, pre-programmed fear. And that's what I read when I was reading this, that everybody has essentially fight or flight instinct that they cannot win against with logic and reason. And this is what the ultimate Room 101 torture device is comes from. But
Yeah.
is that what you thought? It's like how you understand it?
Yeah. Well, they knew Winston through and through. They figured out his every last weakness, and they exploited it until they completely broke him down and took every little bit of humanity out of him, basically.
Yeah.
And his last shred of humanity was holding on to loving Julia, and they
Mm-hmm.
and by saying "do it to Julia, don't do it to me," he sacrificed that part of himself.
Yeah. He lost. He lost, and so but he didn't die. So when I read it, he actually left. They released him back into the world, all messed up.
They gave him a sinecure.
I don't know, like this. Did he become basically another version of the character he saw early in the book with Rutherford and
Yes.
Aronson? Because he does kind of still have a job. He still kind of go to work, but it's not really important.
Yeah. Well, Orwell describes that Jones, Rutherford, and Aronson also were given sinecures. A sinecure is basically a job that you give somebody in order to pay them, but it's not really important that the job gets done. It's just sort of like a honorary, not honorary is probably the wrong word, but like a symbolic job. So so Winston was a member of some committee that was drafting some rules on whether commas should be used in newspeak under certain circumstances. And he would describe how he would meet with this committee and on some days they would decide that there really wasn't any work to be done. And so they would break up. And other days they would get down to work drafting some long involved memo and then never actually finish it. And so all these people were people who had been tortured in the Ministry of Love and had been broken down and had been released for, I guess they released them just so that other people will see them and to demonstrate the power of the party.
Correct. I think that's the main goal is to show that the party has power over everybody. Even like, but the thing is like,
sorry, and they don't even observe these people once they leave the Ministry of Love. It's like they can do whatever they want, but they know they're not going to do anything because they've been broken down. So
that's the part where I was like, nah, that doesn't work that way. But real world, you just leave in a labor camp permanently. But what's to say is like brainwashing does work. Because some people do have a hard time. Like I've watched. There are TED Talks of people who leave North Korea, and just adapting to the new life is difficult for them because it's just so different. But what I was curious is, do you think in 1984 the Brotherhood is real, or is something the party makes up to, basically trap people like Winston or other people like him?
Yeah, it's unclear, but it's highly implied that it's just something the party created as a trap.
Yeah. I felt that I felt both ways. I'm like, at first, of course, reading it, I'm thinking it is real, but then, if the store is a trap, if O'Brien is a trap, I think the Brotherhood is, and then what's it, Samuel Goldstein is all Emmanuel. Yeah, along with the Big Brother, all that information, it just is another way to vent, right? It's another way to think that you're escaping. It's a fake choice, kind of like or the Matrix, right? Where people didn't like the world, so they give them, choices, but it's fake. So that's what I was thinking more toward the end. I'm like, I wonder, once he released, they don't care because, frankly, if you have, let's say, any inkling of, go search somewhere or find a Brotherhood again, you just fall right back in the same trap. So they don't have to worry about him as much since it's unlikely. And they succeeded because at the end, he suppresses his own thought, which is so scary when I was reading that his mind was reprogrammed to the point where it did not trust itself anymore.
Yeah, he had false memories. There was a happy memory of him playing with his mother and his sister when he was a kid, and then he was like, "Well, actually, that never happened. That was a false memory." It's he, and he's like, "They happen from time to time, and I just need to be aware of when they happen."
That is brutal. That's brutal. I was thoroughly defeated reading this, and I was like, "Wow, they got him." And so yeah, you have some notes here. Unless I don't know, you want to cover more stuff.
Well, we're just at the hour point, so I think we should wrap up soon. But let me just there's two things I want to talk about first. The first is the concept of the mutability of the past. So there's a party slogan: "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." And obviously this relates to Winston's job in the Ministry of Truth and how they update records to conform with whatever the party wants it to be the truth in the present moment. But my question is, why do you have to have those two different phrases? So the first phrase is, "Who controls the past controls the future," and then the second phrase is, "Who controls the present controls the past." Why wouldn't it be, "Who controls the present controls the past and the future"?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But I think whoever controls the present controls the past is because if you don't control the current society, people have independent thinking.
Right.
Right. So you need to control not only the past, like things change all the time, but also the present in regards to that there is no other escape. So maybe that's what Orwell was thinking. But,
yeah, like maybe you can only have the future hasn't happened yet, so it's like when there's only now, and when the future actually happens, it will be now then. But so when he's referring to the future, he's referring to the projection of the future, I guess, from the present. So that makes sense.
The party only wants one future, and that's the future where the party wins, right? 1984 party wants to be in the future where it's their future, period. There is no other version except that version that they want. So in order to get there, all population has to be under control. And whatever segment that you're in, you have to think that way, period.
But if you control all the events of the past so that they conform to your present view, then there's no past that you can say, "Hey, it was done like that back then, so maybe in the future it can be like that." There's no reference point to compare the future to. So I think
it's just the inner party, I guess. But other than that, his writing, I did find it confusing, but maybe it was really just the party wants to control all time possible.
No,
past, present.
I think we just figured it out. Actually, it's split that way because it's not the actual future; it's the projection of the projection of the future from the present. So okay, that makes sense. All right, so that's taken care of. So the final thing I want to look at is Winston a hero in the sense of the hero's journey? Now, my observation is that 1984 is the hero's journey, but it's twisted. So like Winston obviously is the hero in the sense that he's the protagonist, and the party is the antagonist. And O'Brien is Winston's mentor, but he doesn't mentor Winston for Winston's own benefit. He mentors, but in a sense he does, because he's trying to get Winston to stop fighting the reality of the party. And so like, what is the definition of a hero in this sense? And the definition I came up with is a main character who struggles and is ultimately changed by the experience. So you can argue that Winston was changed for the negative. I guess you could argue that he was changed for the positive as well.
Yeah.
but it's an interesting question, I think. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was gonna say not every story conform to the hero's journey, right? I
No,
mean,
right. Yeah.
Stories exist before that and after that, and you watch any other movies, not everything has an antagonist. And I would say O'Brien is not. I mean, does every story need a mentor? Maybe, maybe not. But O'Brien is definitely, I would say.
Can you name one story, and I can tell you who the mentor is in that. Name one movie. Name one book that we both have read.
Requiem for a Dream. Who's the mentor?
I don't remember it well enough to know.
Do you need a mentor in every movie or every story?
Well, my answer to that is I don't think so. But at the same time, it seems to keep repeating itself over and over. Like I would say, the vast majority of stories do have that structure to them.
To me, O'Brien is the antagonist, right? He's definitely like the enemy. If there is anything like as a mentor, it's the idea of the Brotherhood and the fake book that was given to Winston. But as far as like an actual character, that was O'Brien gave him that.
Yeah.
But so I mean, you can call him whatever you want. I would call Winston the main character of the story.
Well,
as far as the hero, sure, if you want to call him the hero, he didn't really defeat anything, so there would be no point in calling somebody a hero if they didn't win.
Not necessarily. His struggle was heroic.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I just don't, comply to the hero's journey format, so to speak. But I love, the book still.
Well, it does. There are a lot of elements that fit with the hero's journey. That's just why I'm
absolutely.
But they're twisted. Like. Yeah.
I would say that Winston is not the hero in my definition, and regardless of whether how you define hero to the hero's journey or not, I would say that he definitely went through a journey, but he went, he just got defeated. He's the main character of the book, but.
So in
there's no hero in this story.
Your definition of hero means someone who wins.
Triumph. Yeah. If it doesn't matter if you triumph over an actual evil, it could just be triumph over yourself, like you actually succeed in whatever of your story arc. But his arc is that he triumphed in failing. Like he he got defeated. There's no triumph. You don't walk out of the story, feeling. Feeling rejuvenated in a way, not for me at least. So I would say he's he's just the main character of this story. It's still beautiful, but just it's.
See, I guess I disagree with you there. I think I don't know that it's not. I think this book proves that it's not necessary for the hero to triumph in the end in order to be a hero. I think he just needs to struggle. And I think that a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be a mentor for the benefit of the hero. He's just someone who teaches the hero something.
Well, that's yeah. And does it have to be a person then? Because you're losing all sense of definition if you want to call it.
I don't know that I'm losing any definition. I think this is the brilliance of 1984, that it took this familiar structure and it twisted it in such an interesting way, in such a subtle way too. And part of this, so part of my you asked me last time, like, what my attraction to 1984 is. If someone were to ask me what my favorite book or novel is, 1984 would be my first choice to answer that, because this is life. Like, this is, we don't live in a totalitarian state where we're being observed and tortured, but I've definitely experienced in my life situations where, it was no win. And I was confronting malevolence and trying to hold on to my own shred of humanity, my own sense of self, and the forces were all arrayed against that. I probably broke down, just like Winston.
I can see that, and it makes a lot of sense. But you can see that that's not the only experience of life ever, right? Like you
No,
can
no,
see
of course.
outside of that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
especially in my position now. But
your favorite book.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, outside of that, it's just like it's not it's not like I would say everybody struggle,
hmm
and in a sense, yes, you can relate to the book, but not to the degree of you know of Winston. So like for example, Equilibrium, I love it because it's a movie and it mirrors a lot of this, but it's an action movie where the character wins. And I thought that he did do a struggle. He went through a struggle. The character went through a struggle, and then actually succeeded in regards to, achieving his goal of having a resistance or a revolution.
hmm
So in this version in 1984, it just didn't follow the same path. Um, and he actually succumbed to defeat. Like he couldn't hold on to his own mental thinking, clarity. Right? He was defeated internally, and that to me was the most important thing.
but
Because once,
from the party's perspective, he succeeded.
yeah. So the party is the hero.
No, no,
If
no.
there's
From the party's perspective, Winston succeeded.
right. Winston succeeded in becoming a good citizen,
hmm
but from his own original, when he kept the journal, his mental, track was lost. It's gone. It's erased.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's up for debate, but definitely still central character to the experience is Winston Smith. So I don't think you need to define it to appreciate it.
No,
You know,
I just thought that was an interesting area to
yes,
explore.
yeah, he did definitely do a twist, and I love it because of that. I think it's not boring for one, and second it's scary compared to our modern world because I see a lot of similarities to our current society and political climate, and I'm afraid it's just gonna keep becoming until we can evolve ourselves, which I doubt. Um, 1984 is a good, I would say must read for anyone who want to explore.
It's a
You know,
cautionary tale.
it is a cautionary tale, but it's also if you want to understand how our world is becoming the way it is now, then it's a good book to read too, to kind of just understand a little bit better about society. Sad but true.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
our reality can go in some pretty horrific directions,
Yeah.
and it's up to us
Yeah.
to prevent that from happening to the extent we can. But
Yeah.
that
Follow.
doesn't look like we're doing such a good job at this point. But anything's possible.
Yeah. We'll be all right. I think we're not too bad. Um, we're not that far yet. And
No,
I was I wrote down. I don't know. I haven't read this book, but it's the struggle for meaning
hmm
that once Winston mind was reprogrammed, it doesn't matter anymore. But before he was caught, he was in this mental state of just depression.
you're talking about
And
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
yeah, I haven't read that book, but if these last two episodes, to our listener, if it drags you down, my I've been told that this book is really good. So if you wanna,
It is. I've read it. It's also short too. It's only like 100
yeah,
pages.
if you wanna boost yourself back up from, from these last two episodes, then go ahead and check out that book, or go watch a funny movie, I suppose. But
All right. I think
yeah,
we should end it here. I think, but
awesome.
this was good.
Yeah,
I think we covered a lot of
are
the
all the grounds.
of the beautiful parts of this book.
Yes. Well, thank you, folks, for tuning in and listening to the second part of this. You said we would read along? No, it's just more like
A discussion.
a discussion of 1984. We'll see if it's if you guys like it or comment. Comment if you like it, and we'll see if we can do more of it. But
Be,
that's it. Thank you so much.
be
Go
the
ahead.
be the first to comment. We've been
Be the
asking for
first to comment.
comments and we haven't received any, so it would be nice to receive. And if you do, you could, be proud of yourself for being the first one to ever comment.
No, on this episode or in general, period.
Well, okay, you could argue that Scott Markowitz commented, but
Yeah.
that was just from the first episode, and he felt obligated to do so. He wasn't commenting. He wasn't making a comment from his heart. It was.
Yeah.
He was just being nice.
Yeah. Yeah, like a real comment on the subject of the or topic of the podcast.
Yeah.
Episode. That's what you want. Okay. Cool. Well, that's it, folks. That's all for this episode. Stay tuned for next week. George, you want to sign off?
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Take care.
Hello, listeners. This is George with the Epic Meta Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Did you know that you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube? You probably knew that one of those was the case, but the other ones are the case as well. Please be sure to click the like button if that's in accord with your reality. You can also share our podcast with your friends, give us a 5-star rating, and all of that. Please also give us your comments. Be very interested to read them. But more importantly than all of that, just continue to listen to the show. And as Thang would say, be good and be well until we meet again.